We're going to start this video off with a challenge. It's going to be your job to get your login button as close to this one as possible. Now, there are a few steps you're going to need to take. Right here, there's three big ones. Create the new file. We're going to create a button partial in the components directory. Set up the selector with the styles, and finally use the new class name for the login button. So, are you going to get it pixel perfect? Probably not. Is this 18 pixels of font or 16? What's the exact padding? We're just going for big picture stuff. We'll go through the actual details afterwards. I just want to give you a little experience adding new files and styles to your React app. So take some time to try to style this button, pause the video, and when you're done, click play. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and get this done. Step one is going to be to create the new file inside of components _button.scss. And once we have that file in place, I am going to go ahead and actually import it. So inside of styles, we're going to use @import. We're going to provide our path ./components/button. Now that we have the button file actually loaded in, we can start the process of defining the styles. I'm going to define the selector first. That's going to be .button. This is going to be for our standard blue button, and I'm also going to use this class in the login page. Right here on our button, we're going to be setting up class name, setting it equal to. We'll use the button class. Now we can save this and just focus on the styles. We've imported it, we've used the class. All we have to do is add some styles. And I'm going to start by setting background equal to that blue. Now your blue might have been different than mine as long as you did get some sort of blue in place. The one I'm going to be using is the hex value 1C88BF. So that's going to be a nice bright blue, and I will break this out into a variable we can use and reuse. So I will cut out this hex value. I'm going to replace it with a variable name, something along the lines of blue. That's $blue since it is a variable. And then I will just define this variable over inside of the settings file. I have the settings partial right here. I'm going to set up blue just after dark gray. $blue, setting it equal to the value I copied, and now we can save both files. So I'm going to save this one where the blue variable is created, and I will save the button file where the blue variable is used. Before we go any further, let's make sure we actually did set up everything correctly, so the button should be blue over here. It is indeed at least blue, so we can focus on the rest of the styles. The next thing I'm going to do is set the color. The color is going to be equal to white as seen in the final version. And I'm also going to remove the border, something we've done in the past. Right here, in alphabetical order, I will add on border none, making sure to actually remove that currently gray weird looking border. This should put us one step closer towards the final styles. Over here, we are looking just a little bit better. Let's go ahead and continue on. Next up, we're going to go ahead and set the padding for the button. So I'm going to set the padding equal to, and I'll be using the S size variable here, giving us a nice small padding. And I'm also going to be setting the font weight, the thickness of the font. I'm going to set this one equal to 300. Cool. Now, the last one that I will be setting right here, that is going to be the font size. So I'm going to use font size. And for this one, I'm going to stick with 1.8. REM, so something a little bigger than our paragraph font size. And if we go ahead and actually save this, we can see what that looks like over inside of the browser. We should be able to see that in just a moment. And right here, we can see the styles showing up. So that's pretty good. The last thing I am going to change is the actual text from login to login with Google. So over here, I can fix that in the button itself, login with Google. And that's going to make sure we have the appropriate text showing up. Now I am going to use this value elsewhere. We're going to be sticking with this as a standard for a lot of our buttons and inputs, so I might as well break this out into a variable. Over inside of settings, I could put this under spacing, but it's more of a font size as opposed to a spacing, so I am going to create a separate section for font sizes. Font sizes. I'll just call it font size. Down below, we can make the variable $font-size-large, and I'm going to set this equal to 1.8 REM. Now we can take that variable name and we can use that over inside of the button partial as opposed to just defining the value in line. I'm going to remove that, pasting in the variable name. So now we've broken that out into a variable. We have our button created and the login page is basically done. There's not a whole lot more we're going to do here. We might come back to it a little bit later on when we focus on mobile styles, but for now we do have things set up pretty much exactly as we want them. There are a few small changes. I am actually going to change this from Expensify app over to just Expensify. I'll remove the app text from the H1. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and log in and start placing a focus on what's obviously the more complex part of the app. I'm going to move through the login process. I'll be logging in as the account I've been using throughout the videos. And then over here, we should see the app showing up. So here we have a completely unstyled application. Now, the final version of the app is obviously going to look a little bit different, so let's go ahead and actually pull that up as well. I'm going to log in inside of the other application that I have locally. You can always log in to the version of the application hosted on Heroku. So once I do log in, we'll be able to see the final styles, so here they are. Now there's a few notable differences. First up, we actually don't have a navigation item specifically for dashboard. We can just click the actual app text up above. Then we have logout over on the right, and the ability to actually create an expense that's not really shown in the navigation. It's part of the summary area right here. So we are going to need to do a little bit of restructuring in order to get everything working like so. Over inside of Visual Studio Code, I'm going to be closing down a few of these files. We can close down login page. I'm also going to close down box layout, and we'll just stick with these for now. We're going to be making some changes to the header component, so let's go ahead and crack that open and take a quick look. A couple of important things. First up, we do have a create expense link right here. I just mentioned that's not going to actually be in the header, so I'm going to remove this. Now we are going to have a link that goes to the dashboard page, but it's not going to be a navigation link and the text isn't going to be dashboard. Instead, the text is going to be our H1, Expensify. So I'm going to take the H1 and cut it out from up above. I'm then going to remove dashboard completely and actually break things out. And right inside of nav link, I'm going to paste the H1. Now, do I actually want a nav link? Do I want an active class when I'm on the dashboard page? No, that doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to remove active class name, and I'm going to switch this from a nav link over to just a regular link, both of which we've used. So I'm going to switch it over here, and then up above, I'm also going to switch what I'm importing. I'm no longer using nav link, I'm just using link. So now the structure looks a little bit better, and we're going to focus on actually applying some styles right here. So let's kick things off with the header itself. This is where we're going to set that nice dark blue background color, so we can actually create a new file in the styles components directory right here. _header.scss, and in here we're going to go through that same process. First up, we can switch over to the styles file and import it. I can just duplicate this line if I want, changing the last part from button over to header. So we have the styles file in place. We have a little bit of structure in order to actually style things. Let's kick things off by creating a selector for header. This is where we are going to define the background that is going to be that blue color. Right here, background. The hex value for this one is something we're just going to break out into a variable. Our variables live in the settings partial. So inside of here, under blue, we can have dark blue. So that would be $ dark -blue. And we're going to set it equal to a hex value I've picked out ahead of time. That would be #364051. That's going to be a nice steel blue. And we can go ahead and actually use that color as the background for header. Right here, dark blue. And once we actually set that up, we're going to use the header class right here, class name equals header. So this is going to get us at least one step in the right direction. And if we do view the changes over in the other tab, we can indeed see that blue showing up. Obviously, we've made things pretty awful, maybe even worse. So we have a weird purple color for the link since we've clicked it before. We have our log out button, but nothing's really looking right. So what we're going to do is just continue on styling. Still a little bit of work left to do. And what I'm going to focus on is this link right here. I need a way to target this, so I'm going to create an element for header, class name. I'm going to set it equal to, right here, header __ for the element, and I'll call it something like title. And this is going to allow us to define some styles to override the ones we're currently seeing. We're going to get rid of that underline, we're going to change the color over to white, and a few others. We can now add the selector. header underscore title. And what styles do we actually want to apply? Well, I do want to set the color equal to white, making sure to remove the default link color, which switches between blue and purple depending on whether or not you've clicked the link. Then right down below, I am going to set text decoration equal to none. This is what allows us to clear the default text decoration for links, which is just an underline. Now, we do want to add one style to the H1 as well. I can create another class, or I can just target all H1s inside of anything with a class of header underscore title. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'll add a little nested selector, and I will just target the H1, setting margin equal to 0. This is going to clear the margin. The title does not need a margin of its own. We're going to handle that with a little bit of padding on the header in just a few moments. So if we do save things, we get a slightly better looking header. The Expensify title looks correct, even though it's placed poorly, and we do have the logout button not styled at all. The next thing I want to focus on is centering that stuff. Remember, we're not going to be using the entire page width. At some point, we want a max width. So maybe right here and then something like over here, and the entire application could fit inside of there. So to get that done, like we did for the previous project, I'm going to create a new partial underscore content container. And this is something that we are going to use and reuse quite a bit. The content container.scss partial. And this is where we're going to define that max width container where we center everything nicely. Inside of here, we'll be adding a few styles. First up, let's just go ahead and actually import them. Inside of styles, once again, I will duplicate the last line, changing out header for content hyphen container. And now we can actually set up the selector in here like we did last time, content hyphen container. The content container is just going to have a few styles to make sure that we get everything centered appropriately. We can start off with a max width, and we're going to use a value along the lines of 80 REM for that. And if we are going to set a max width, we want to make sure to center things when we go further than that width with the browser's width. So if the width of the browser is 100 REMs, we want to make sure we have 10 REMs distributed on each side. We get that done with margin 0 auto. Auto makes sure to evenly distribute the rest of the space on the left and the right. For content container, we can also set up a little padding. I'm going to set up some padding, but not on the top and the bottom. So I'll leave that value at 0. We're just going to set up padding on the left and the right, and I'll use the M size variable. This is going to make sure that none of our content ever pushes up right against the edge of the browser, which is exactly what we are seeing right here. So with just these three styles in place, I can go ahead and save content container, and I can actually use this class. Like we did previously, we want to create a wrapper div right here. This div will have a class name equal to content hyphen container. I will close off the div, but I'm not really going to close it off here. I'm going to take that closing div and move it after log out. I want all of the stuff in here, the link and the button, to be inside the content container. So with this in place, we're going to be a step closer. We now do have things centered. We just don't have the content distributed. So the log out button is still on the left as opposed to the right. So to get that done, we're just going to add one more header selector and create one more wrapper div right here. The final div we'll be creating for this one. We're going to open it here and we're going to close it just after log out. And in the end of the day, with this div, the real goal is to just add on a class and use Flexbox to distribute things left to right. That would be a class name. We can give it whatever name we choose. I'm going to be using header underscore content. And this one is going to get targeted over in the header styles partial down below, or actually right here, dot header underscore content. For the header content, what do we want to do? Well, we will kick things off by using display Flex, which solves all of our problems, programming or not. And then we're going to go ahead and set up justify content. We used center previously to style this application. We're going to be using the other value we've used before, space, not around, but between. That's going to distribute all of the leftover space between the two things, between the Expensify title and our button. Now, aside from the display flex and justify content, we can also set up align items to align all of the items vertically inside of the header area, align items center. And last but not least, I am going to add a little bit of padding. So I can set up padding. I'm going to set some padding on the top and the bottom. I can use S size. And on the left and the right, I will stick to 0. I'm going to save the header partial. Over here, we can view if the changes are actually working as expected. And right here, we do get what we expected. I have the Expensify title on the left-hand side. It is showing up nice and centered, and it links to the dashboard page. So if I'm on another page, like the edit page, I can just click it to go back to the dashboard. And on the right, we have our logout button, which isn't styled just yet, but that's okay. At least the header is structured, allowing us to continue forward. That's exactly what we're going to do in the next video, so stay tuned and I'll see you then.